Good evening, everybody, and welcome to what should hopefully be a fairly special episode of the Green Pass Gaming Podcast. As you might be able to tell, I am not your host, Flap. Unfortunately, our good friend Flap is feeling a little bit under the weather this evening, so I guess it leaves it to the three of us to hopefully steer this podcast and ship into what will hopefully be a pretty good episode. So apologies, we're a few minutes late. A little bit rusty on putting the podcast live, but I think we're up and running. So please let me know, chat, if you can hear us, if things are up and running. And I'm looking forward to tonight's show. So tonight's show is actually going to be focused. It's going to be a bit of a Halo special. We've been saying we were going to do this for a number of months now, essentially since Halo Infinite was released. And while it hasn't been the quietest of weeks, certainly on the Xbox front, it's been relatively quiet. So we thought this was a great week to be able to get into all things Halo. So tonight we're going to be chatting about the campaign. And I guess just a heads up, we are going to go full spoilers. So if you maybe haven't completed the campaign, maybe come back a little bit later in the show. We're going to talk about the state of the multiplayer at the moment, which is a pretty hot topic in the Halo community. And then also we're going to touch on the Halo Silver Timeline, which is the TV show that should be coming out a little bit later this year. I think March 24th that goes live. So I've just seen there's a nice message from Flap there. Hope you're feeling well, mate. Saying all good. Thank you very much. But without further ado, let's introduce the rest of the panel. So, Luke, how are you doing there, mate?
Yeah, I'm very well, thanks. It's been a long time coming, this one, hasn't it? And looking forward to chatting about it. I've got quite a lot of thoughts now, actually. It's been quite nice to kind of, I'm still playing the multiplayer, but I've had time to kind of settle on what I think about it, particularly the campaign.
Yeah.
So, it'll be awesome to have a chat and see where we land. And the TV show, which I have thoughts on as well.
Lovely. Yeah. Obviously, me and you, I think, are probably the two bigger Halo fans on the panel. So we've been desperate to sort of get this show in, and we're now 2 months out from the official release of the campaign. So I think people have had a nice amount of time to dig into the campaign, hopefully complete it, get some thoughts, and obviously the multiplayer's had, let's say, some ups and downs in that time as well. So I think we've got a lot to talk about. And also on the show tonight, Flap's normal, I guess, usual wingman. I guess I've got two wingmen tonight because I'm going to need a little bit of a hand steering the ship. But we've also got Puxley. Puxley, how are you doing, mate?
Hello. Yeah, I think Luke's going to be our main wingman tonight. As you say, I'm not the biggest Halo fan in the world. I have played Halo Infinite, of course. I haven't finished the campaign though, but again, as we said in the green room, more than happy to hear spoilers because I'm not super into the franchise like you guys. I kind of see myself being maybe a bit more of a fly on the wall this evening because of the lack of knowledge. But again, always happy to participate and add as much as I can. And no, I'm really looking forward to this show. As you said, it's been a long time coming since we've said that you guys wanted to do a Halo special. And this seemed like a really good week, as you said already. So now I'm really looking forward to hearing both of your thoughts on the Halo universe.
Wonderful. Well, I think, Pux, you're going to have a really good perspective because me and Luke are obviously massive fans. And you come from it from maybe a different perspective where you maybe a little less invested in the franchise in the way that me and Luke are. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the campaign. You're someone who is yet to complete the campaign. So I think it's going to be really interesting to maybe talk about that. You know, why did you drop off? What would make you come back? Was it just not good from your perspective? You know, I know there's a lot of people who maybe aren't the biggest fans of the direction that 343 took Halo Infinite. So it's going to be good to get into that. So lovely. With introductions out the way, I guess I'll just quickly have a look at chat. We've got Flap in the house as well, as I said earlier. Like I said, Flap, I hope you're feeling better, mate. Obviously, we're going to miss you tonight. Hopefully, you're back for next week's show. We've got Meisuko and Tuku and Gula in there as well. So, guys, if you do have any thoughts on anything we talk about tonight, please let us know in chat. We'll get some of the comments read out on the show as well because we really want to know what you guys think. So, shall we kick it off with the campaign? So, maybe a little bit of context for people on Halo Infinite's campaign. So this is 343's third stab at Halo's campaign. They obviously started with Halo 4 They had Halo 5 and now Halo Infinite. And it's been a bit of a rocky road for them. I think, particularly in hindsight, Halo 4's campaign is looked back on quite fondly. Particularly just where they took the story. Halo 5's campaign was pretty much universally panned by everybody, especially those maybe quite in the hardcore Halo community. And then Halo Infinite's campaign, generally at release, came out to, I think, more or less universal praise. A lot of people seemed happy with what they've done. Obviously, there's a very big departure, I think, from your traditional Halo formula with some of the changes that they made. But it's fair to say that 343 have had, somewhat of a rough ride so far with the Halo franchise. Look, I want to start with you, Mick, because I really, really want to hear your thoughts, because I think me and you are on the same page when it comes to maybe 4 and 5 story, where 4 we liked, 5 we hated, and now we land with Halo Infinite. So I'm curious, mate, just what's your overall thoughts and feelings on the campaign now that you've had a little bit of time to digest it?
Yeah, I mean, totally agree with the kind of consensus that you've offered with 4 and 5. I think 4 was a really good start. It felt like a really good foundation, and then kind of 5 was just a mess. Just not just story wise, but I think in terms of what you expect from a Halo campaign. And coming into this one, I guess. The build up for this was so long, not just because of the time it took them to develop this from 5 to Infinite, but also, we had the initial reveal, and that did not go well, and then we had a year's delay, and then it kind of started looking better and better, and then it finally landed. And obviously reviews landed as well, and they were very positive. And I've played it, I finished it, and I come away from it kind of with mixed feelings, I guess. I think it's a lot better than 5. Like, I don't think there's any question about that. It's miles beyond that campaign. And what I do really love about it is that they, kind of scraped away almost a lot of, not the lore, of the last few games, but more the background noise that goes on around what Master Chief is doing, and try to condense it into a very simple story that people can jump into. But it's got plenty in there for people who perhaps, like Pucks, maybe aren't super familiar with all of the games before this one, and who aren't totally invested in the kind of build up to this one. So I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed Master Chief himself in this. I thought that the kind of extra nuance that his character is given is something that we haven't really seen from any of the other Halo games, particularly the early ones. They went that direction a little bit with 4 and a little bit with 5. But the problem with 5 was that you couldn't really go that far with it because he wasn't there. You know what I mean? Like,
I think
he didn't appear.
Was it like 3 missions, 3 out of 12 missions? Exactly. I think he was in, which was it was always, I think, that they took that criticism to heart with this one.
Exactly. Yeah, you got tons of Spartan Lock and every other Spartan except for the one you actually care about, apart from Buck or whatever. But I think this one was interesting for that. And I think the supporting characters are, Pilot, it's a bit kitschy and a bit weird at times, but I think it's, it was a good foil for Master Chief's character, and it kind of allowed him to delve into this kind of deeper emotional depth that the character has. So that was cool.
Yeah.
And the weapon as well, is a. I initially thought that might be an annoying character, but actually, I think she kind of grows on you as the game rumbles on. I don't know what you thought about it, but certainly I quite enjoyed her character. And I should as well say that I think Escheron is actually a really good villain. He's not super complex, but I think the way, his kind of rationale for the things he does is regarded in, his his kind of warrior pride, and he's more concerned about, because obviously spoilers now, but he's essentially dying. And I thought it was really cool that he was like, all he really wanted out of the rest of his life was to, go down in a blaze of glory. And that's, kind of harkens back to those classic, those historical generals who feel the same way. So I really enjoyed that. And I think there are a couple of other, minor characters that are pretty cool as well. But so I think I came away from a story perspective, and we can maybe talk about the beats of the story a bit more soon, and that goes into more spoiler territory.
Yeah,
I think bringing it to something that was a bit more condensed, a bit more kind of narrow-minded, straightforward, was a real positive. What I think the thing that the story suffered from was that they almost made it too simple, and it didn't feel, it felt very much like they had a much greater arc planned for the entire story, but they just didn't have time to implement all of that. It's exemplified by the ending, of course. And I think that idea that, that feeling that I got, it kind of permeates to the rest of the game, where there's such a fantastic base for the, Infinite going forward and further games. And it didn't quite feel like it landed fully for me, in terms of the entire experience. Even though I really enjoyed it, and I should stress that I really did enjoy it, there's just a lot in that game where you think it has so much potential, and it had so much potential if, ironically, they'd have been given even more time. I legitimately think if they were given another 1.5, 2 years, it probably, which is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous notion.
6 already.
Yeah, but it feels like if they'd have been given that time from where they started, from the Craig demo, to flesh the story out, to flesh the world out and the campaign and the gameplay within that world, it would have been an easy 10 for me, an easy 10. As it was, it isn't, but it is very good. And I probably rambled on enough. So interested to hear, what you or Pucks think about it.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because I think that feeling, regardless of how long it was in development, if they just had a bit more time, or if they just took a bit more time, I think also is sort of part of the feeling of the multiplayer, which we'll come on to a little bit later as well. Which is, as you said, look, it is mad to think after 6 years of development. Now, we probably should highlight, a lot of that development time, I believe, was spent on the engine. It was a new engine.
Yeah.
Obviously, the development at the business end of development was during COVID. There was rumored to be 2,000 people or so working on this game in various aspects at some point, and I can imagine it was a hell of an effort, particularly doing that remotely. But at the same time, this was a game that had a 6-year development cycle. It was originally due to release at the launch of the Xbox Series X and S, and missed that by an entire year. And then we're still saying, actually, it probably could have done with a little bit of additional time in the oven. I do want to touch on some of the you said though, Luke, with Pucks. So Pucks, Luke made a pretty good point there with regards to the story and how they almost reset it. And it was kind of how did Bonnie Ross put it, almost as a spiritual reboot to Halo Combat Evolved. And I think they set out with the intention of giving maybe newer players or lapsed Halo players an opportunity to jump into the story at a certain point. So I guess first of all, Pucks, what's your sort of history with the previous Halo campaigns, and how did you feel as somebody who I guess, depend on where your position is, how did you feel coming into the story? Did you feel lost? Did you feel like they give you a good introduction to the characters, why they're there, who the Banished are, things like that? Where did you land on that, Matt?
So on the first point then, I started playing Halo from the first game, originally on PC, and I really enjoyed it, actually. I think out of the first 3, or at least it felt like the longest one. I didn't actually play much of 2, if at all, and I think the only parts I did play were around a friend's house, back in the day, playing multiplayer or local multiplayer type thing. But I think my first proper Halo experience was really Halo 3, which I kind of, to say that I kind of knew what was going on might be a bit of an overstatement, but I was following and kind of trying to fill in the gaps as much as I could, but I wasn't I was never a massive fan to the point where I would go away and want to look up, or had a desperate urge to play the other games, for example. But I was aware of some of the the main kind of the baddies or the antagonists which exist. Obviously the main Covenants, and you've got like the Flood, and they're a thing, and they somehow fit in the universe somewhere. But I haven't actually. I mean, apart from playing a bit of multiplayer during the competition we all did last year, I hadn't actually played any of Halo 4 or 5 at all. I have no experience of the campaigns. I remember seeing the original trailers for Halo 4 when they were a thing. And again, cinematic trailers for Halo, for the most part, always look really good and really enticing and stuff. But at the time, I didn't have an Xbox or PS4 or anything, or no current gen at that point in time. So they kind of came and went. So did Halo 5. And it wasn't until, again, picking up the Series X and eventually Halo Infinite comes out. So in terms of Infinite, then, I guess, again, I can't really tell how far I am into the story, but I feel like I've done a good few of the main story missions so
Whereabouts
far.
are you up to then, Puck? See if we can get a gauge of where you're at.
Yeah, so I've just taken over. How do I explain this? There's like a massive cannon thing that's shooting into a load of the black rock, like the hexagonal rock things.
Yeah,
and you have to kind of take it out and then take out all of the banished around it. And then once you've done that, there's a bit of a boss fight, and then you go down into that and then out the other side. And I think when you come out of that, I think I've met some queen or some female alien character that flies around.
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
You might be able to tell by my descriptions already that I am. I don't really know who they are or what their names are. I can appreciate. I mean, I've kind of grasped in terms of where I am that she seems to be kind of the main leader or something, and the banished general guy is kind of feels like he's the head, but he's not, and kind of following what she's trying to do or something. It feels like they're kind of together, but not to try and take you out. And I think the last I played it, I think there's like two twin banished bosses you fight at the same time, and it was across like a massive body of water. And I think that's kind of where I got to, and I kind of stopped after not long after that. But I mean, from what I was playing, I quite enjoyed it. I going from the older games, which are very like completely level based. It has a set beginning and end to each one. There's a set pieces that exist at specific points, etc., etc. So I suppose having gone from that to open world wise, I think it's really good. Again, I think, but mainly because a lot of games in the last 10 years have slowly been ramping up the open world efforts to the point they almost feel like they're synonymous with any kind of. For a lot of big games now, you kind of expect them to have some aspect of open world, or at least that's the impression I think a lot of people tend to have now. I mean, I am enjoying the game. Do I know if I'm following the story? I don't know. But as Luke said, the weapon, which is the Cortana clone character, if I remember correctly, I do like how. I think the personality is really cool. I personally don't necessarily know why Cortana's disappeared. I know through the in-game dialogue they mentioned about she was meant to get deleted after setting off some sort of weapon or something. Please correct me, by the way, if I'm wrong.
No, it's actually interesting, Pucks, because I think kind of what you're demonstrating in a roundabout way is maybe they didn't do a particularly good job of explaining who these characters are.
Possibly,
who's maybe new to it. And I think part of the problem is, and actually, look, have you read any of the Halo books, mate?
I've actually read precisely one. Which was
that?
The first one they ever released, and I can't remember the name.
So that would have been either First Strike, Fall of Reach, or The Flood.
I think
one of those three.
So I can only remember certain bits of it, but I remember, and you might be able to tell me which one this is, where they are being trained by Halsey, and they are dropped into some snow-covered environment, and there are wolves or something like that.
I mean, we're going back
early
a long
John
time
117.
for those first, yeah.
Yeah.
So Yeah, so I guess for context, I'm maybe a little bit further along. There are 30 plus books. I think there are
Yeah, there are
31 books
lots.
at the moment.
Yep.
So I've not read them all. I do have a good selection of them. I have read a handful of them, maybe 10 or 12 or something, not the entire range of 31. And I think maybe that's one of the struggles that 343 have, is that there's such a rich, deep lore involved in Halo, and a lot of it, and this applies to Halo Infinite, I think you almost do need a bit of the backstory. And the prequel to Halo Infinite wasn't really Halo 5, it was actually the book Halo Shadows of Reach. Which is why maybe somebody new to the story probably looks at someone like the weapon and go, who the bloody hell is she? Like, where did she come from? Why does she look and sound like Cortana? And
Yep.
things like that.
It was, having looked at the Wikipedia synopsis, it was in fact the first book, which is The Fall of Reach.
The Fall of Reach, yeah.
Yep.
Cool. I guess it probably should be, it's probably worth mentioning, if you are interested in the Halo lore, they actually did just recently release the Halo Encyclopedia, which I think you can get for about 40 to 50 quid, I think, on Amazon, which looks really, really good. So if you're interested in sort of catching up on the lore without reading 31 books, I think that's probably a good place to start. So yeah, but like I say, Pucks, I think that kind of helps demonstrate that maybe they didn't do a particularly good job of setting the scene. And I think they made almost two mistakes, I think, in the storytelling, particularly for new people new to Halo. The first thing is the introduction of the character of the weapon and how she comes to exist, which I don't think is fully explained in the story. And then secondly, I think the time skip at the beginning of the game, where essentially you see the introduction, 6 months pass, and then you start playing the game. And then you've kind of got to piece together through audio logs and things like that, exactly what happened in that 6 month period while Chief was essentially out floating in space. And if you're not somebody who took the time to go and read those listen to those audio logs, which not an awful lot of people, I imagine, did. I certainly haven't listened to them all, because kind of I'm in the middle of my second playthrough at the moment. I'm going to go back through and get all of them. I think it's very easy to miss
I'll be honest as well.
Story.
I'm very much in that camp of, I think the first one you ever find, I think it kind of makes you listen to a bit of it. But apart from that, no, I kind of find it. And if I can, because they even give you the ability to, does it tap and hold like the X button or whatever it is on the controller to just skip it entirely. So, I mean, and for the most part, I think players would do that, right? I mean, unless you're really invested in it, I guess. But I mean, I do appreciate that, the game was trying to, as you say, it was kind of, from what I remember, at least reading at the time, and that the game was trying to obviously entice new players into the series and try to introduce them to the world a bit, but at the same time trying to stay dedicated to the the hardcore fan base behind it that have been following it for 20 odd years or whatever. So in a way, I mean, I suppose knowing that, because I'm into gaming, whatever else, that and I look up that stuff, I can appreciate that does sound like a massive challenge for anyone of any major franchise, I guess. But I mean, do you reckon that, from what you just said, do you reckon this would you call it a failing of 343? Have they misunderstood the fan base, or do you reckon it was time? Do you reckon, was the game released too early still, do you think? Or yeah, what do you reckon, I guess?
Yeah, and I think, kind of touching on what Luke said, I think yes, ultimately is probably the answer there, because you look at just the cut features, co-op, Forge, you look at the state of the multiplayer at the moment, and I think overall as a game, it was relatively polished. Like, I didn't encounter any bugs or anything like that, so it was a pleasant playing experience, but also it was obvious that there was content cut from the game. So yeah, it really could have done with a little bit more time in the oven, I think. These sorts of things are difficult, though, isn't it? They had already delayed it a year. Then could they have asked for more time? What impact would that have had on Xbox's holiday? Would it have had any impact at all, considering they were selling consoles faster than they could make them? Look, what are your thoughts on that, mate?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think even if you just look at the set of cut features from the game that would ordinarily be there at launch, you can tell that it came in very hot, and that it was still after all that time, not rushed, but they were, set on getting the core campaign and multiplayer out and building from there. But I think even if you look beyond that and then you start looking at, and I think we'll talk about multiplayer soon, but certainly campaign, as I was kind of alluding to earlier, I think there's you look at the way that they have done the world in that game, and it's not open world; it's more like kind of hub areas, which is absolutely fine for Halo. I think that works perfectly. I don't think it needs to be properly open world, and the hub areas are really big. Actually, there's pretty significant size going on. But you look at kind of the activities in that world. There aren't that many. There's not a lot to discover, and I think the thing that I felt about Infinite was that it didn't feel like an alien world, if that makes any sense. It felt like I always remember, and this is nostalgia talking, but you in Combat Evolved, right, when you drop down from the Pillar of Autumn and then you go out into the Halo for the first time, and it feels extremely alien. It looks weird, and there are these things going about, and even though it's really a small area, right? That kind of area you're in, and there's nothing to discover really. It felt like there were a load of possibilities about what you could find, and I think if you look back on that original in-engine slipspace kind of demo, when they were showing these different environments, they have these kind of weird elk deer creatures in the world, and big groups of rhinos or rhino-like creatures, and huge horizons that kind of, and underwater bits as well, and cave systems and all of these things. And it made it feel, and I hate when people make this comparison, but it's kind of apt. It's like a Breath of the Wild type world where there's a lot of intrigue everywhere, and you might come across something that you're just like, wow, that's so strange, and you might never encounter it again. And I just feel like, that was almost certainly the original vision for that campaign, was very much, we're going to have all these weird things in for people to discover, and time constraints and budget constraints or whatever coalesce to make it so that they just could not deliver on that. And as a result, the world feels very copy-paste at times. It's beautiful. It's a really beautiful world, actually. And I think it's just all so superficial, a lot of it. The thing, however, that makes it land is the gameplay, and I think that's the thing that keeps you playing more than anything. It's the loop in that open world is the one major success of that game, because even if you can't approach things in a stealth-like manner, or it's kind of always guns blazing, there are so many different ways you can actually approach combat in terms of the weapons, loadout and vehicles, and whether you got Marines or not, and all that kind of stuff, that it hangs it together. I just wish that, and I'm sure they will probably explore this more going forward, but I just wish that they made the world feel a little more, quote unquote alien, a little more like there's lots to discover there, which there isn't. That's the problem.
Yeah. It's interesting to see that, look, because I do actually just want to say thank you to Installation 00 who's joined us in chat. It actually makes me incredibly nervous to talk about the lore of Halo when somebody like that is listening. If you're not familiar, Installation 00 has a channel on YouTube where he delves very, very deeply into the lore. It's one of the 3 Halo channels I subscribe to, alongside Hidden Xperia and Halo Canon. And if you are interested in the lore, I would absolutely recommend checking out his channel. But he did very recently post a video where he talked about expectations versus reality when it came to Halo Infinite, and there was a couple of things that he pointed out. Look, first of all, he touched on Halo 1 Combat Evolved, and the feeling that you get exploring that first Halo, and how the biomes being one thing that maybe is a little bit lacking in Infinite, where in Halo 1 there are different areas. The snow area is particularly famous in Halo Combat Evolved. He also touched on the initial reveal and how the wildlife was I guess there was wildlife in Infinite, but it's kind of like birds and golfers,
Yeah,
more or
yeah,
less, not the sort of the larger, more alien-looking animals from the initial reveal. And I think that is a sort of a fair criticism, and it is something that I hope
yeah,
they explore with future DLC in the game,
yeah,
because there is so much more to explore in that ring. You can see it if you look out
yeah,
on
yeah.
the vistas. You can see those different areas. You can see things like a down guardian that you just can't get to at this moment in time. So I hope we get an opportunity
Yeah.
to visit there.
And yeah, I think just all fantastic points, and yeah, his channel is awesome, by the way. So you should absolutely go and look at it. But I think another big point is it, and which has been touched on, is the biomes or lack thereof, right? It, it, it's an issue when you go around what's supposed to be a alien world, albeit it mimics, a lot of what we see as familiar. When all the environments are Pacific Northwest, essentially, and again going back to Combat Evolved, and I hate to do it, but that's like even as you're coming into the area where the flood are, it's kind of a swamp basically, and it's not a huge variance from the rest of the environment, but it's quite a simple one that's quite effective, and it feels like there's something weird there. And that whole section has amazing atmosphere as well. It's such a great slow build to their reveal, but I think I have a couple of friends actually who are Halo fans, but they're not like huge Halo fans. I think they kind of rest on the Puxley spectrum, if you want to call it that, where they have enjoyed past games, but they're not necessarily super invested in the lore, and they're not like huge gamers. But they played through most of the campaign, and then they were speaking to me about it, and they both had the exact same complaint, which was that they said all the game is going from A to B with in the same environment, and then the same forerunner structure every single time, with slight variances, and it kind of ground them down, and they're not huge fans, right? And I think some people maybe overlook that because we are such, like, I was like, oh no, yeah, no, I agree, but actually I'm not finding that problem. But the more I reflect on it, the more I'm like, actually they're kind of right. It's kind of they needed to, like, it's not just that the outside world is repetitive or the same, it's that the forerunner structures are functionally identical. And in the original Halo they did that any of the interior structures because of hardware limitations, etc. But there's not that excuse here. The excuse is, well, we just didn't have enough time. We didn't have enough time to do it. I mean, it's strange. I just find it strange, and I don't mean to seem like I'm super bashing the game, because I'm not. I really enjoyed the campaign, especially, and multiplayer. But there's just so much potential. I'm just like, I really want them what they can actually do with the right amount of time. That's now that they've got the base to kind of go deeper with it all.
Can I add as well? Do you mind if I read out a comment that I've just seen?
Yeah, go for it.
I've just seen something here from Tukum Gula, who says, I'm sure they could have done more with additional time, but they did a great job considering all the challenges they had. And again, I don't want to, keep repeating things that we said multiple times on previous shows, but, COVID aside, I think, can we keep blaming that? Or do you reckon, is this down to, given, super fan like Luke and yourself saying, these things about, if they had more time, they could have done more. But then, these things are estimated and planned out like any project of any or most industries, right? So it's almost, I suppose my question is, where was the failing? Like, where can we speculate where the failing was? Is it going to be typical? Was it a management issue? Was it, top down, maybe people at the top not quite being big gamers and running the project like a different type of industry, which doesn't always work, because I can't remember specifically, but I know I've read things like that before. Or, it's almost like, where's the line between they needed more time, but it was all going well, or actually the challenges were all self-imposed because of bad management or whatever,
Yeah, I think the answer ultimately, Pox, is we probably won't ever know for certain, but it probably lands somewhere in the middle, where I think it's undeniable that the pandemic would have had a significant impact on the development of the game. I don't think there's any denying that, and I don't think anybody, and then this goes for any game developer, can say like, oh, they're just using that as an excuse. No, of course not. You know, you have to drastically change how you collaborate, and you know, even in my line of work where we work from home and I've got a small team, you know, we lost a little bit out of a team of 5, and we're talking about thousands of people who are working together ultimately on the same project. I mean, it's obvious, I think, that the game had some development issues prior to the pandemic. I think that became obvious when they brought Joe Staten in to essentially steady the ship and get things out the door. I think it was Chris Lee, the previous studio head, who was essentially let go, which was after the I guess it's fair to say pretty dreadful campaign reveal. I mean, I say dreadful. I actually didn't think it was that bad in the grand scheme of things. I thought the reaction was a little bit overblown, but obviously it wasn't well received at all. And like Installation 00 says, when Joe came in, the game, I guess, was in a rather difficult position. And I imagine what he's come in and done is he's looked at the current state and he's had to say, right, I need this much time. I need to cut this and this to hit this date, essentially. And that's why we got the decisions where co-op was cut, where Forge was cut, where multiplayer is lacking in certain features, because they essentially set themselves a target of what they could deliver by, you know, that 12-month period. The thing is, I don't think I could ever have seen a world where Halo didn't hit last fall. I think that was kind of the very latest that game could have released. And Joe Staten came in and basically just said, or Staten, apologies, I'm not too sure entirely how it's pronounced, came in and said, right, this is what the game will look like for us to hit that date. And that led to cut content, cut features, unfortunately, but I guess that is kind of the reality of game development. Things aren't going to go smoothly.
I suppose the other side of the coin as well is that, you know, this being basically Microsoft's big and, you know, most popular IP on the platform, it's kind of what put Microsoft on the map, isn't it? So if there was any game that you can't have delay, as you say, from fall 2021, it was it was this game. Any other franchise, I think, or most others, I'd imagine slipping it, you know, having another slip probably would have been acceptable for most people. But yeah, as you say, I can definitely appreciate why this is the one IP that nope, it has to come out now. It has to fit in perfectly enough with the 20th anniversary and and the like.
Yeah, I mean, if you remember, they had the Halo console that came out alongside the anniversary. It had the Elite Pad, but the game couldn't quite make it for the anniversary. It took an extra couple of weeks for the game to hit in the end. So yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to. I'm not a game developer by any stretch, so I don't want to, you know, assume what it's like to develop games. I'm sure it's friggin' hard, especially in those conditions. And there was probably an awful lot of pressure on 343 to deliver, you know, on what is Xbox's marquee franchise off the back of the poor reception of the original game. And I think ultimately, I know we're talking. It might sound relatively negative, and at the moment we're talking about some of the negatives. But as Luke said, and I'll echo it, like I bloody love this game. I really love this game, and it's because of that love that I've got these critiques. It's because I care, if that makes sense. I care about the lore. I care about what stories they tell with Master Chief. I care that Master Chief is the main bloody person in the game. I care that it's fun to play. I care that the multiplayer maybe has a little bit of work to do. And that's what leads to sort of these criticisms. If it was a game that I didn't really care about, then, you know, fair enough, I would have just forgotten about it by now. But, you know, that's not how I feel about this game. So,
Yeah, I agree with that.
I think maybe let's take it back to the story, because I appreciate we've actually spoken a fair bit without touching too much. No, that's fine. That's sort of what we wanted. We said it was going to be fairly fast and loose. Luke, you touched on the weapon, and I think the dynamic between the Chief and the weapon throughout the game is actually one of the things that I really enjoyed the most, actually, because I mean, she's obviously I guess for those who don't know, and spoilers, apologies, I know Tuku's playing the game, but this kind of comes from before it. This is touched on in the game. The weapon is essentially Cortana, but without the memories that Cortana has. She's an AI that was developed from, I believe, again, this makes me nervous saying things like this when someone like Installation 00 is in the channel. Essentially, a clone brain from Dr. Halsey. One of those clone brains made Cortana. There was another one that was sort of rescued from Reach, which was the overall story in the book Shadows of Reach, and then the weapon was created from one of those clone brains, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I guess it's a very roundabout way of saying it. So she's essentially the same as Cortana, but she does develop her own personality. I think the way they sort of wrote that character, she isn't just a carbon copy of Cortana. She has her own almost playful, a little bit naive personality that I think Cortana didn't quite have, and then how her dynamic works without Chief, and how it sort of highlights Chief's trust issues because of the issues that he had with, I say issues that he had, I guess, the story that went on, particularly in Halo 4 and then followed into Halo 5. I found that dynamic really, really interesting. And then look, also, as you touched on, the dynamic between Chief and the pilot really sort of humanizes the Chief in a way that I don't think it did very often in previous games. And I think how they wrap that up is nice in a way. I know there's been a lot of speculation about that ending scene, which I don't think we'll touch on. I think we'll maybe try to leave that. But look, how did you feel about the dynamics between the weapon and the Chief, and how they, I guess, differentiated the Chief from Cortana?
Yeah, I thought it was again, as I said at the beginning. I was anticipating that, at least from the trailers, that I might find her a bit annoying, and I didn't know quite how they were going to play her character and the interaction with Chief. But I ended up really liking her as a character because she acts as you say, I mean, she does multiple things, but she acts as a foil to Chief, where he plays it. I mean, it's basically a buddy cop, story between them, right? And she is somewhat of the humor, but she kind of cuts through all the stoicism of Chief, which I quite liked. And also, not humanizing because she's an AI, but she brings out that kind of different side to him, which I thought was good. And what I like about it as well is they don't. I was a bit worried with the direction they were taking that, because I think one of the things I was concerned about is that they couldn't humanize Chief too much, because it would be weird, if like suddenly in Infinite he's like super emotional all the time, and it would almost be out of character. But they just kind of tweaked him, so, and I think the weapon really helps in that, and the pilot does to an extent as well. The pilot, even though I like the pilot, I did find the pilot a bit annoying. I don't know why that is. Sometimes characters just grate on you. I would also say that I don't know why they did the reveal of his name in the way they did. And I won't say his name, but it's basically in terms of the plot or anything in the lore, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's meaningless. Like, it doesn't mean anything. It's just that they kind of withhold his name until they kind of ask him.
Yeah. I'm not actually too sure. So I kind of almost felt that was maybe, it feels to me, and anybody in chat, please let us know your thoughts on this. They kind of left that to give them the opportunity to do what they did with the weapon, if that makes sense.
Yes,
because
I see what you mean.
Conversation between Chief and the pilot allowed them to lead into that conversation between the three of them.
So almost like a device to get to the weapons point at the end.
That's kind of how I got to it, because we know him as the pilot, but obviously in the game, he's Echo 216 is essentially what they refer to him as. But then it turns out he essentially stole the ship and in a way to escape. And I do think there's a lot of people who share your thoughts, Luke, where they maybe found him a bit great and annoying. But I think kind of what I liked about him was he almost represents maybe what I would be like if I was in that situation. I'd be shit scared and I would just want to get as far away from it as possible. And obviously he's essentially the opposite of the chief in that respect. The chief obviously wants to finish the fight, and then as the story develops, he kind of comes around as that relationship between the chief and the pilot develops, I guess. I guess maybe speaking about characters. So we've got the Banished. So the Banished are the and the villains in this game. They were originally introduced in Halo Wars 2, for those who haven't played that game. It's interesting because the opening cutscene where they show the fight between Atriox and Master Chief, I think Atriox is one of the best villains that has existed in any Halo media. I think he was a fantastic character in Halo Wars 2. I think part of me originally was a little bit disappointed that he didn't play a bigger part in Infinite, but I think it's obvious, without touching too much on spoilers. I am conscious that I don't want to spoil too much, that he will play a part in future DLCs, but I mean that in itself is probably a pretty big bloody spoiler. But I think when you touched on Escharum earlier, Luke, and I think the development of his character throughout the game kind of softened that blow somewhat, because I did think Escharum was a really good villain, and it kind of distracted me from the fact that Atriox wasn't there. Pox, did you have any particular thoughts towards the Banished as sort of an enemy faction? I guess the Brutes in particular, or Escharum in particular?
Again, I can't really very well compare them to things like the Covenant, because I don't know much about either side. But I do very much like how they're portrayed in the story from what I have played of the game. Obviously, you've got the main cinematic shots when it goes closer to the face and stuff. But I think even when you're fighting against them and stuff, fighting against them in the wild, if you encounter them, or you can like find where they are roughly, or whatever it is on the mini map, and like they do always look and feel and sound strong and powerful. And I've definitely had experiences where I thought, let me just see how this goes. I'll go storming in. And of course, there's kind of the small army of Banished you have to kind of get through before you get to the main guy. And I have had many times when I've been absolutely slaughtered by it. And when I do manage to fight my way to where the boss is, like I have had my rear end handed to me a number of times, put it that way. But then I know I've had a number of encounters as well, which in a way I think is the good part about the game, you know, in terms of being open world and stuff, where you can do these things in any order you want. In that, I think I was doing some other mission and I've come across, I can't remember the weapon's name, but there's a weapon which is almost like a guaranteed one-hit kill, or against a strong enemy or a boss, it kind of takes up most of the health away. And I think from a distance, I was using this weapon and kind of sniped at one of these kind of small-time bosses, and I think within 2 shots it was dead. And you can hear him in the distance kind of saying that, you know, he's going to tear me limb from limb or whatever else. But then just shortly after that, I've got him in the head or something, and, you know, he's gone. And there's just like a few other stragglers left behind, and I pick up the powerful weapon and go ahead for it. But no, I've really enjoyed those encounters. But no, to answer your question, sorry, no, I've really liked the way they are portrayed. You know, as I say, strong, powerful, and they sound very good as well. Like the audio in this game, I think is definitely second to none. Whether it's how the guns sound or how the enemies sound, you do know when danger's coming, and and in a nice way, it's pleasantly terrifying at times.
Yeah, I think actually the sound design is something that I think Halo, I mean, just audio in general in the Halo franchise has been something that has been, I mean, generally speaking, across the board, excellent. Whether it be the music, obviously the the music in Halo's always been fantastic. I think that's no different in Halo Infinite. Whether it be obviously Steve Downes' voices, the Chief is iconic, or something like the sound of a rocket launcher or a sword, or the BR in particular. And then you've got the I think actually, speaking of Escharum, Luke, I think the voice actor who plays Escharum, I think he's a fairly famous voice actor, but I'm not too familiar. But I think he's excellent. I don't know if you're familiar with the voice actor.
Yeah, he also plays Reinhardt in Overwatch. So yeah, quite familiar. Is it Darren DePaul, his name? Something like that. He's been in lots of stuff. I know him best as Reinhardt, having played Overwatch for like 1,000 hours plus. He's really good. He's really good, and he really gets into his performances, which you can absolutely tell with Escheron. You know, he's kind of living for it as he's playing him. So it's kind of over the top, but in a way that makes sense for the character.
Yeah, so he's in a lot of things actually. He's in Psychonauts 2, Avengers, he's the Hulk in Avengers, he's Revenant in Apex Legends, he's in Doom Eternal. He's got Darren DePaul. He's got quite the resume, but I think he does a fantastic job of Escheron. But then you've just got little things like the grunts. I think the grunts dialogue in this game is fantastic as well. The propaganda towers. I don't know if you've had an opportunity to stop and listen to any of the propaganda towers. They offer an element of humor, which is something that I think is quite important to Halo. Like, I know it's obviously a very serious story, but I think it's always had an element of humor, whether it just be something as simple as, you know, the work that the elites make, or the screams from the grunts. It's always had that element of humor, and I think Halo Infinite nails that as well. Cool. Well, I'm conscious that we've been going for an hour, and I think, to be fair, we haven't touched on a lot. I think there's still a lot what we could talk about the overall story, particularly the ending. But I am conscious that we've been going for an hour. We've got a few people in chat who haven't played. Obviously, Pucks hasn't. Look, Pucks, do you have any other thoughts regarding the campaign, or any other particular points that you want to discuss before we move on to discuss the multiplayer?
Just give me more biomes.
More
biomes.
Give me some snow. I want snow.
Give me some snow. I want snow. I want jungle, and desert. Give me those. I'll be happy.
Yeah, I think the ending scene touches on one of them, I think, to say the least, Luke, which does give me hope. And maybe just going back to something that Installation 00 mentioned in chat as well, that let me just find the message. Apologies. He says he has it on good word that the next campaign is massively increasing the scope to in line with what was originally supposed to be, which is obviously fantastic to hear. And he also mentions he has it on good word that the cut content, so we spoke about maybe things that were dropped to ensure that they could release in December of last year. It's not gone, and it's on the way for future campaigns, which actually maybe we'll finish on that before moving on to the multiplayer, which is the fact that Halo Infinite is supposedly a 10-year game. We'll see how that pans out. And I think, you know, from a multiplayer and live service perspective, I think that's fair enough. You know, you look at games like Fortnite, Warzone, you know, those typical games, those are ongoing. But I think what makes Halo interesting is the prospect of campaign DLC, which I'm trying to think. I don't think they've done campaign DLC in the past. I guess in the mainline first-person shooter games, they did some DLC in the RTS. So the DLC actually for Halo Wars 2 was really good, actually. But in the mainline games, I don't think they've actually touched on that before. So that does give me hope that we're going to be able to visit some of those biomes. So we're going to be able to see what the ending really meant. You know, we've obviously heard a lot about the Endless. We're going to see what the Endless are and what made them so, I guess, such a threat to the Forerunners. So that does give me hope. What sort of timelines would you like to see on the DLC, Luke? Do you think, is that something you want to see once a year, once every 2 years? Are you expecting smaller? I'm thinking like Hive Busters like experiences, or do you want something a little bit grander, a little bigger?
I think, to be honest, I'd like them to adopt, and you know, I think this is a bit washy, but I'd like them to do the type of thing they do with Destiny 2. Obviously, I'm not expecting, you know, I don't know if I presume they wouldn't. I mean, they may charge for these outside of Game Pass, right? The kind of, I don't even want to call them expansions necessarily, because I don't know if they'll do it in that way. But, you know, kind of when Destiny 2, it introduces like a big new kind of campaign every at least once a year and a bit, right? Or roughly speaking. And I think that would really work for this, because I think if you take the whatever the next chunk of campaign will be, and you have it in a desert biome, and you have new things to discover, new activities, and all these extra bits and pieces, that will feel really fresh. And then if you go to the next one after that and you do a snow biome, right, or a mix of different biomes, and have these kind of ongoing saga, if you will, of Chief on this Halo, I think that could be really cool. I don't know if they will do it that way, but that's the way I'd like them to do it. I think as long as they do a campaign drop where it's significant and it advances the story, then that's kind of all I want, along with the change in scenery and new mechanics. But I think that was one of my only other criticisms of the game in general, actually, was the ending. The ending kind of happens very abruptly, I would say. I don't really feel like it earned that. And I think if you're someone like Pucks, and I'd be interested to know what Pucks feels when he finishes it. If you're coming in and your kind of expectation maybe is a close-ended story with room to do stuff in the future, you don't actually get that. I mean, this isn't, it's very much, okay, we're not finishing this particular story here at all. This is ongoing now, and join us in the future, sort of thing. And again, I have friends who are really annoyed by it for that reason, that it's not even as if you could say, well, that's this particular story tied up. Maybe they'll do other content in the campaign on this world. It's kind of, no, this is going to be a long, kind of a long form story. Personally, I don't mind that, because I think, everything will come to Game Pass, and that's going to be enjoyable. And I think there's a lot they can do over a long period of time, sort of long form storytelling that they can do, and mixing that in with new areas of the world to visit and all that stuff. But it still was very like, it's finished. That's weird, I think there's stuff they can do in terms of timing for downloadable content, single player content. I'd hope at least one pretty significant drop a year of stuff.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It would be nice to hopefully be able to see what they've got in store for the story, hopefully by the end of this year. The difficulty is considering all the other work that they've got, whether that be the features like co-op, Forge, the ongoing live service of the multiplayer, will they be able to hit that? Where's their focus? What's their priority? Do you think we'll see other playable characters, Luke? So something maybe like ODST, where maybe we take control of an ODST that's landed on a different part of Zeta Halo, or maybe a different Spartan. Maybe Locke makes an appearance back, because he might
don't
be
say
on,
it, Scott. Don't say it. Don't say it. I've just got visions in my head of one, the next, the next expansion ending on a cliffhanger where Chief is in trouble, and then Spartan Locke dropping from the sky to rescue him, and that's the next DLC after that. I hope I could see them doing other characters for sure, and I think they've got a good template, as you mentioned earlier, with something like Hivebusters, where this is outside in the same world but outside of the Gears 5 story, and that really worked and landed well. I think Locke is probably too toxic to do something with at this point. I think he will just, there's already people that are getting annoyed with Halo Infinite, and something like that would make them more annoyed. So I think maybe another Spartan, and there are a whole host of Spartans you could use for that. What I really don't want them to go back to this Halo 5, well, I'm sure, look, they're going to introduce co-op, and I've got no issue with that, but I don't want them to base future content around co-op, like basically all of Halo 5 was based around co-op. I just don't think it works in Halo. It's great to play with your friends, and when you're kind of nondescript Spartans, it works. But if you're, in certain gameplay scenarios, but if you're basing your campaign around it and there's an emphasis there, I don't think it's particularly fun. Particularly in this type of game where it's all about the adventure and big open hubs and lots to explore, and you feel kind of isolated and on your own, right? I don't think having 3 people shouting in your ear really works tonally with the world that they've gone for. So, I personally, I think they can at least squeeze a good few extra campaign elements out of Chief alone, and then go from there.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously with the way the game ended, they've still got a pretty big story to tell. Chief's still on Zeta Halo. There's a big character. There's an entire faction of enemies that we're yet to meet. That I guess kind of yet to meet. There's still a bit of theory around that. So Pucks. I'm conscious we've not heard from you for a while, mate. I know me and Luke have been speaking a lot about future DLC, but as somebody who's yet to complete the campaign, what's it going to take to bring you back? Is there anything in particular that made you drop off? Was it just you weren't interested, or is there anything in particular that'll bring you back to actually complete the game for the first time?
Well, man, that's a tough one. I think I'm not sure if I keep kind of saying it almost feels like an excuse, and I think it kind of is and isn't the reason. Part of it, I think, is earlier in the beginning of last year, playing massive games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for instance, and I'm putting just over 100 hours worth into a game like that to finish it all. And after that, I do remember quite vividly feeling very burnt out with open world games at that point. I think the idea of going in and knowing this is going to, whether I enjoy it or not, it's going to be a grind that will potentially stop me from doing other stuff. Like a game like that, it's hard to. And I typically have I say by no fault of my own, it's completely my fault, but I tend to have maybe 3 or 4 games on the go at any one time for various reasons across platforms or whatever else. But when I was playing Valhalla, for instance, I was into the game enough that I wanted to finish it, but at the same time, I knew I wanted to play other stuff. So I made sure to finish it, and I almost forced myself to finish Valhalla so that I could play upcoming stuff. And I suppose with Infinite, there was that was obviously the main release around the Christmas period anyway. But I also knew coming into this year, whatever else, that there would be other games I'd want to play that I think I'm bigger fans of potentially, and I know I say deserve my attention more. That's not the right turn of phrase, really, but I didn't necessarily want to put myself into loads of hours to play it. But at the same time, as much as I really wanted to get into it as well, and I think some of the reasons that I think Luke highlighted, especially earlier, about how, despite how very, how beautiful the landscapes and stuff are and the environments are, I think even as a non-massive Halo fan, the game did feel like it looks all the same, if you get what I mean. And I do kind of agree that, even as I say, not as someone who's played many of the previous ones, that I think the big thing I do like about a lot of open, again, Breath of the Wild's a perfect example. I love that game and forever will love it. And I think the big reason why I did love it isn't just because of the gameplay elements. I think it's because there are these massive areas which are all interconnected, but they're all so completely different from one another. Whether it's the literal environments and then the things that kind of ascertain the environment around it, whether that's enemies or the people or the architecture or whatever. And from what I've played so far of Infinite, it's very much not that. But then at the same time, from what I know of the game, I appreciate that it's the Zeta Halo is a man-made structure, and whether or not it should or shouldn't have more than one biome because of the fact it looks like it's meant to be some sort of grassy plain. I don't know. But then I think when I look at the minimap and things like that, for example, and I go to these, you go like the small points where you can save some Marines, or you can find those the propaganda towers and take them down and things like that. And I was doing those, and I was, I originally felt quite happy to go ahead and find them, clear out the areas to do it. But then I suppose for me, it felt almost repetitive. It was like, oh, okay, there's another squad there. It's going to be a bit of fighting. I'll release some guys which don't really feel like they add anything. When I first freed some Marines, I think the game obviously makes you do it when you first kind of have some free reign for the first time. You know, you get into like the warthog for the first time, and they jump on the back. One of them's, you know, by AI controlling the minigun and stuff. And the first few times I did that, it felt okay. I've got a bit of backup now. It feels quite cool to go in with someone. But then they appear to very quickly disappear or clear off on their own right, to the point it's like, well, what's the point of saving you all if you don't really feel like you're there doing anything? And I suppose it was kind of, I guess, a build-up of small things like that, where a number of the smaller tasks, which were kind of meant to encompass the main story, almost felt redundant and pointless, because apart from the fact that they're there to complete or achieve, I didn't really feel like they added anything to the story, if that makes sense. I mean, maybe I'm talking out of turn because I just haven't played enough of the game. I don't know. But yeah, I think it's kind of a small kind of growing of reasons like that as I've been playing it, which is like I wasn't enjoying it as much the more I was playing it, because it felt like I was repeating the same thing with no real reward for it, apart from just completing a percentage marker. Which is not what I kind of play those games for. I mean, again, not to keep comparing it, but I know Breath of the Wild, once you finish the main story, has a completed counter, or percentage counter, sorry. But I didn't care for that. There are some games where I like to know I've got that figure, and other games where I love it so much I don't. And that was very much one of the games where it never really has had a completion counter, or percentage counter, I should say. And therefore I don't care for it. And I think, you know, past games in Halo, I don't believe had specific, you know, you have to 100% this to unlock things, unless it did. Please correct me if I'm wrong there. From the little I've played, I don't recall there being much in terms of completion rewards, but is that the case?
In Infinite, I guess there is sort of a completion percentage counter, and it counts because there's actually a fair bit of side content. You know, there's the FOBs. There's a lot of high value targets. There is armor lockers. There is audio logs. Skulls. So there is quite a bit in Infinite, and a lot of the things, like, I mean, in previous Halo games you've had things like terminals, and you've always had skulls. So there has been that sort of thing in Halo in the past, but I guess it just depends on how much you care, really, how much you actually want to get those things. And like I said earlier, kind of a lot of the story is actually tied up in some of those audio logs in Infinite. So look, what are your thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I think no, I think I agree with you, mate. You know, it's there's I think just in general, like, to bring it back to the point I was making earlier, there is a lot of side content in the game, but I think there's not enough variation of it.
Okay.
So it's all familiar, and I think certainly there's more than there has been in the past. I mean, clearly, because the scope and nature of the game has, you know, changed from the old Halos, and there's always been, you know, the collectible skulls and all that stuff, and they're still there, but it's just not. They feel a little redundant now when you can have so many other things, I guess. But I mean, they'll always remain there. But I was never a big collector of them anyway. So yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah, it is interesting, Pox, and I do hope you get a chance to get around to complete it. Maybe it's something that when co-op comes in, maybe that might entice, you know, where you can go through and you know, play with friends. You know, if it's, I don't know how many players. I think it's actually going to be 2 players. It would have been cool if it was up to 4. But it would be something that maybe, you know, playing through co-op will be good, or maybe they introduce a different, you know, a DLC story that adds that variety, where, you know, that kind of encourages you to go back.
I think that's a good point, actually. I mean, because again, other bigger games like that, they kind of completely facilitate single player, right? And you can kind of tell that just by general gameplay mechanics. But yeah, this one, it does feel like the kind of game where it will be more fun and engaging with someone else there that, you know, is obviously going to be jumping around with you and stuff.
Yeah. And I think the sandbox that they've got in Infinite actually will lend itself to kind of like a fun co-op experience, because, you know, if you've got somebody who's maybe flying a wasp, and then you just got a grapple shot with the crazy low cooldown, and you just Spider-Man and across Zeta Halo on somebody's Wasp and things like that. I think there will be a lot of like really cool and fun mechanics that Co-op will bring in, but I also can understand why Co-op probably give them a massive headache in Infinite compared to previous games, and maybe one of the reasons why it was delayed. So yeah, maybe that'll be something that brings you back into it, Pucks. And if you do, obviously it'll be great to know sort of what your thoughts were, particularly on how the story landed. As you know, somebody who's not as into the Halo story, but yeah, it'll be good to hear where you.
Yeah, no, I certainly intend to finish it at some point, and it will be this year. I promise you that. But I just don't know when I'll get back to it yet. But I do hope it will be soon.
Cool. Righty. Well, let's move on to the multiplayer side of things. So the multiplayer is obviously I guess the big part of Halo. I think it's probably fair to say, multiplayer has been something that's been kind of the hook of Halo since the original days. I remember playing Halo Combat Evolved through GameSpy and X-Link Kai. I don't know, Luke Pucks, if you ever dabbled in that sort of thing where you hooked your original Xbox into an Ethernet port on your PC and wired through that way, which was looking back, how the bloody hell did you ever play multiplayer in that experience? Halo 2 obviously more or less revolutionized, I think it's fair to say, the sort of online multiplayer for games. Halo 3s and Halo 2 are two of my favorite multiplayer games ever, two of my favorite games ever. Halo 4 went downhill because they chased COD, I think is a very simplistic way to put it, but I think they made some decisions that really made it more like other games and less like Halo. But one thing I think 343 nailed, and we spoke about sort of a criticism of Halo 5, I thought Halo 5 was fantastic from a multiplayer perspective. And coming into Halo Infinite, I was a little nervous about what decisions they would make on the multiplayer side of things. I guess it's kind of a lot of these things are more generally speaking about Halo as well, because there's always the debate about sprint or no sprint, clamber or no clamber, whether you've got Spartan abilities like Spartan Charge. I can't remember what all the moves were actually, but the fact that everybody had thrusters and things like that. And I was nervous as to how far they would either deviate from Halo 5, because I think a lot of the hardcore part of the community were against a lot of the decisions they made in 5, and maybe how much they will go back towards the roots of maybe Halo 2 and Halo 3. And I actually personally think they landed at a pretty good spot. I think they've absolutely nailed the multiplayer, apart from some of the things that maybe we'll come to from a content perspective. But generally speaking, I think the multiplayer is honestly the best multiplayer that Halo has been in terms of how it plays, how it feels. I think they've done a fantastic, really, really good job with the multiplayer. Now, look, I think your thoughts are similar to mine, but generally speaking, sort of how are you feeling about the multiplayer at this stage? I guess outside of battle passes and things like that, which we'll come on to in a moment.
Yeah, I agree. It's I can't even envisage how much Halo multiplayer I've played across the years. Actually, certainly the first 3 games I played an inordinate amount of multiplayer. Quite a bit of 4, less of 5. Even though I thought 5 was very good. And I came to this one thinking, I think the same as you, really, which was that I wanted them to keep the style of 5, but kind of simplify it somewhat, because I think 5 had some things in it which felt unnecessary. I'm not talking about sprint, because I think actually sprint makes total sense for Halo. You're a Spartan, you're not a tank, so and from the minute I played the beta, I knew that it was just going to be brilliant, and the great thing about the multiplayer is that it doesn't rely on things that the campaign falls down on, like story or activities. What it really relies on is moment-to-moment gameplay, and it's the best playing Halo there's ever been by a considerable distance. So, and full credit has to go to 343, because they have transformed that game into something like Halo's always been about that 30-second loop, right? But it's never felt as good as it has in this, as it does in Infinite. And yeah, it's just a total joy to play the game, and I still really enjoy jumping in and playing different matches and modes, and they've done a really great job in terms of a lot of the maps. I think a big criticism of 5 in particular was the maps were not good. I think in Infinite, by and large, apart from 1 or 2, they're very good maps, very well designed, whether they're in big team battle or a Slayer context, because they focus again on that kind of core tenet of multiplayer maps, but particularly Halo ones, which is just they kind of just need to be simple, symmetrical, but have kind of these labyrinth areas that you can divert from and kind of divulge into. They've done a really good job there. There's nothing more satisfying than hearing that kind of weird crackle that you get when you kill someone. That kind of feedback crackle, which is brilliant. And there are issues with multiplayer, which we'll touch on, but I think just in terms of the core experience, it's the best Halo's ever been. Easy.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that entirely. It kind of, I think they've really just got the balance between 5 and 3 or 5 and 2 pretty much perfect, where they've still got sprint, but it doesn't have that much of an impact, but it feels I think someone worked out it's like 2% faster, but just the animation and the airlines that they're bringing just makes it feel like you're moving a bit quicker. But then they've got the equipment, kind of going back to Halo 3, but some of that equipment is moves that you had in Halo 5, such as the thrust. They've kept the clamber and things like that. So I think they've hit a really good balance between those games, and I agree entirely that it's the best Halo has ever felt. Now, Pucks, I think it's fair to say that kind of your sort of online multiplayer, you're obviously a big fan of Call of Duty, which I guess has taken a slightly different direction to Halo more recently. But I think it's fair to say that they're quite different despite operating in a very similar space. I know you've played a bit of Vanguard, and I know you've played a lot of the previous Call of Duty games. How much of the Halo Infinite multiplayer have you had a chance to play so far?
So I played a lot of the second beta round when that happened, really nearing launch. Apart from that, I did play a fair bit of it when the game first fully released, throughout December. But if I'm honest, I don't think I've played it at all this year, which should probably go to tell you how much of it I haven't played. I played it up until, was it the 10 Ray event, when that was first a thing. And I think just shortly after that first ended, or that first season ended of it, whatever you call it, I didn't play much more after that. And that's kind of my current timeline.
Interesting. So what were your overall thoughts on the multiplayer? And was there a particular reason why you bounced off? Was because, it's fair to say 343 taken a lot of flack for the multiplayer, and outside of the gameplay, which I think is, as Luke touched on, I think is fairly universally praised, but it's kind of everything else around it, whether it be the battle pass or the shop or the events, or big team battle having issues, that sort of thing. There's been a lot of criticism directed at 343. Was there anything in particular that sort of made you drop off? Because I guess you've got to remember this is a live service game. The intention behind Halo Infinite, going free to play, taking on this live service model, is player retention. They want to get people in. They want to have people constantly playing it, coming back week after week to do whatever the latest event is, or work towards that battle pass, which obviously doesn't appear to have worked in your case. So was there anything in particular that sort of made you drop off?
Well, I'll start with the good points first, because I think you mentioned that. So what I did like, my initial impressions of the game were very good. And again, back in the day, I really liked Halo 3 and multiplayer, I should say, and this gave me a lot of kind of good nostalgic vibes of that, in terms of how it felt. But at the same time, again, from an online perspective, from a predominantly Call of Duty player, I did feel that the game kind of, in terms of its controls, kind of took on more of the kind of the more established formula, like a COD formula, in terms of how the game felt to play compared to, I think, older Halos. Even small, I mean, this might sound stupid from two hardcore Halo players in front of me, but I remember in the older games, I think the grenade button, for example, would be a different button than it was on COD, for example. And again, I know that's a staple. I know that's a convention which exists depending on what either side of the spectrum you're on. But I think in more recent years, through the 2010s, I think a lot of first-person shooters seem to have taken on Call of Duty as their kind of main base when it comes to controller mappings and stuff. That feels like it's been the established standard. So I suppose kind of playing from that point and seeing FPS games kind of take on those kind of schemes to play Halo and it kind of feel like those kind of games to control was a really good feeling for me, and I really enjoyed it. And the guns as well, things like the guns, they sound great, which I think was good. I think in very recent years, when it came to first-person shooters, audio in terms of guns has been something that I feel has been dramatically improved across the board, across a number of titles. And the guns now feel like they really punch and they hurt, Whereas if you go back to, if you boot up the Master Chief Collection and play some older games there, I know it's arguably an unfair comparison, but just to kind of see where audio has come in terms of how important or how much time it's been given in terms of games. It's such a stark difference. So like in older titles, they sound like pea shooters in comparison type thing. But no, I've really enjoyed the game from those aspects. But in terms of why I dropped off, again, this might just be me from a Call of Duty perspective or that general thing, but because as has been said many times already, because I'm not a massive fan of the series in general, and I haven't played a lot of the games multiplayer-wise overall, a lot of apart from local stuff back on, PS1, PS2 days, my big kind of introduction to online gaming was through initially Call of Duty 2 on the 360, which eventually led to Call of Duty 4, which came out not many years after. And that kind of established the going up the ranks and you unlock stuff. And then since, whether it's attachments, if you work for a certain gun or things like that. And it's things that I really enjoyed because even, I'm playing the game because I enjoyed those games, yet it always felt like he was making progress toward whatever thing he was working with. Whereas as much as I enjoyed things like Halo 3 back in the day, it always felt like I was playing it mainly because, with friends as well, when you're all on one team, it is good fun, especially when there's banter and stuff going on or whatever. But outside of that, I didn't really feel like you're not making much progress to anything or just having fun. So it's almost like it's almost like 20 years on, I guess, from when it's all started. It feels very old school now if you compare it to today in terms of rather you're playing just to have fun with it rather than you're playing to have fun and you get to feel like you're achieving something. I think that's the thing for me, which is missing. I remember when I first played the beta and the first kind of round of multiplayer when the game first came out. And I said on a previous podcast as well that I loved the game, loved how it felt, loved how it controlled, loved how it looked, loved how it sounded, all those kind of aspects. And I think I even said at one point that I saw myself playing the game for the foreseeable future. But then after that, when things like the Battle Pass got properly introduced and stuff, it felt empty. I mean, I'm not necessarily completely 100% for battle passes and everything, for example, but I do appreciate that it's become almost the go-to model for any title that goes free to play now, which, I guess these companies need to make money from somewhere, but as long as the game feels accessible without jumping into that side of things. But even, at least from what I saw at the time, even with the existence of a battle pass and having extra items added and I think, as you said, things more recently, it's been understood there are community problems across the board, effectively that there's not enough content or whatever else. I think content is a real big driver nowadays, and I think I don't think that content necessarily has to be in the form of pay money for a skin or pay for a battle pass and get coins to unlock skins for these things. I think if you was just getting some form of extra experience for doing things with a certain weapon, for example, but maybe just for that weapon, like smaller things like that for me, I think would keep me on board. But I appreciate I'm doing this in a really roundabout way, but overall, I think it's because it doesn't feel like I'm really achieving anything or making progress apart from playing the game to have fun. And for me, at least how I've gotten used to games over the last 10 years, at least, without that sense of achievement as well as having fun, it doesn't feel like that fun fades when there's nothing else to do but play a game for enjoyment. And especially if you're having a relatively bad day with it, or there's the players, the other team, sorry, that you're up against are significantly better than you, and you're getting absolutely slaughtered game after game. When that's happening, and again, you're not achieving anything else apart from trying to have fun with it, that's kind of what also pushed me to drop off. But I am persistent, like a lot of heavy gamers out there. You do try and try again, but again, not a massive fan of the series in general. After so many times, I had enough of it.
Yeah,
To the point, it was
that's
like
perfectly valid.
yeah, and it was. I appreciate it's not the Halo style, so I don't necessarily expect them to implement anything like it. But for me, it was that lack of achievement for each game, and things like again, what was widely criticised was for each game I'm playing, I'm only earning 10 XP unless I'm doing the ridiculous requirements for some challenge, which only
Yeah.
gave you, I think it was like 200 at the time, but you needed like 5,000 to level up to level 4 from 3, for example. And it just felt like, I mean, yeah, I appreciate you need to work for a bit on these battle passes, especially if the idea is that, if you get like the in-game points, whatever they are, to then maybe get the next battle pass. Yeah, of course, as a company, they want you to stick with the game. But when it doesn't feel like that you're getting anything for it, apart from giving them a bit of money for a few skins or two and an XP boost for 30 minutes, it just felt pointless to me. So it's kind of a multitude of all of that guff I've just been twaddling on about, I guess, is why I dropped off.
I think it's all fair, and I think maybe someone like myself, and this probably makes me sound like an old man, and I think this was a sentiment from a lot of people is, why don't people just play the game for fun anymore? But Pucks, you make a really good point. Is just that's not how these games work these days, and they haven't for years, if not a decade or more. You've got games now like Warzone, like Fortnite in particular, Apex Legends, these other live service games that it's essentially competing with. It's no longer just about playing the game. It's about working towards something, whether that be an event pass or a battle pass, or even if it's just a level, even if it's just an account level where the number forever goes up. You're always working towards something. And look, that's kind of been one of the biggest criticisms that Halo Infinite's had, where the battle pass came in for a lot of flack. The challenge system has come in for a lot of flag, and they have made some adjustments to that. But I still don't think it's quite right, and I still think it gets a lot of criticism at this moment in time. And there's been a lot of talk recently about things like the player count on Steam dropping. And it could be argued that if the player count is dropping, which it might be on PC, we don't know about how it's doing on Xbox. Is that because they're just not giving people enough? Have they failed to understand the live service market and adapt Halo for the type of things that I guess gamers or customers are actually looking for at this moment in time?
Yeah, I think they have. I think the whole thing has been a bit of a learning process in public almost. And I think, I get the feeling a lot of the early Battle Pass decisions about progression were very much made because of a roadmap that had been significantly diverted off course. That they probably didn't want to have people plow through that very quickly, because they didn't have enough coming up to kind of satiate the appetite of players who would do that. Yeah. Which is a failing on their part. And so they arbitrarily made it very slow to progress. And I think it's a good point about like, why can't we play games for fun? And like, we didn't have any of this when we were playing Combat Evolved or anything like that. It was just all about, you had no cosmetics at all. It's just about playing the game and enjoying it. But we've spent years and years and years and years being conditioned to, having games that are online and that we play for multiplayer and that we love, but that give some sense of progression, even if that's just cosmetic. And it's very hard to break that mentality. But also, because there are so many games that do this well, it means that it's very noticeable when someone doesn't do it well. And 343 did not do it well initially. Now that they have improved in terms of the way you can level up through the battle pass. It's much quicker now. They're a bit more generous with the XP, which is good. And I didn't buy the battle pass until after they did the first round of changes, so that you could get more XP just from general matches. One of the things that they have really failed on is the idea of these challenges, which are incredibly frustrating to kind of have exposure to, because it, particularly early on, it incentivized players who only cared about progression and cosmetics to kind of abandon the game that they were playing in front of them in terms of the mode and the team, and just focus on those objectives. And that's shit. That it just didn't work. Yeah. It's still a problem now, but it is better now. You don't tend to see it, or I haven't seen it as much in games. And it particularly used to happen in big team battle, which if in those games you can't carry those games by yourself. It's just impossible. So you'd have these ruined experiences. So I think that those factors were a big issue. I think another factor, actually, and this is the one that kind of surprised me, is that between the battle pass and the Tenrai one to some extent, I don't think their cosmetics have been very good. I think they've got some cool stuff, but you look at the kind of things that you could do with Spartan armor and the kind of effects they could have, and the weapon skins, and you look at I don't want to bring it back to Destiny, but look at Destiny, right? I know it's a different universe, it's much more varied and it's much more fantastical, but everything feels so unique there, and there's such elaborate designs for things, and it seems like the design language of Infinite's kind of hampered them, or it feels like it's hampered them a bit, or they have a lot in reserve, but they just don't want to trot it out, and it isn't. I don't look at it and go, oh my god, I've got to. I mean, I was playing Fall Guys the other day, and looking at, looking on the store and being like, oh man, I'd love to, get 2B from Nier Automata as a skin. Yeah. And it just, you never get that feeling with Halo. And I think that's also compounded by the fact that even when you get a really cool skin like the Tenrai one, the way that they've done the color mods and all of this sort of stuff is just so convoluted and stupid, and it's again a way to eke out putting hours into the game. I don't know what you think, because there are some cool skins, there are some cool things, but I never look at it and go, oh man, I've really got to grind for that because it's just so cool, or I'm tempted to buy that because it's just so cool. I never get that feeling.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Luke. I think going into the game, I was somebody who was sitting there saying, I'm ready to spend money. Now, that makes me part of the problem, I appreciate, because, people will argue that that's not what we should be doing. We don't want to be spending an awful lot of money on cosmetics on these games. And they came out the gate with two issues. First of all, pricing. So regardless of the quality of these cosmetics, they were outrageously expensive, and they've made some steps to correct that. They essentially halved everything. That's how overpriced they were. They halved the general cost of these cosmetics. And then the second thing is, you're right, they're just not very good. Now, I had some leftover currency on my Xbox account that was due to expire, and I couldn't think of anything else to buy, so I just bought some Halo credits, and they're just sitting there because there's literally been nothing in the store. I've got the credits there waiting to buy, and there's just been nothing in the store to get in. They've had a couple of hits. I think one with the cat ears, they were particularly popular for some reason, and then also the Iron Man looking
that's cool.
Skin. Well, I guess I forgot what they call. What did they call the colors in the game again? Oh, I can't remember.
something. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but
can't remember either.
the color palette, whatever you want to call it. Apologies. That they kind of got right there. But other than that, you're right. There's not been an awful lot, and I think one of the things that they might have to face up to in the future is they've purposely tried to. They don't. They've basically said beforehand they don't want to go too wacky. Now, when you consider like the wild stuff that you get in something like Apex, the wild stuff that you can get in Fortnite in particular, they can basically do literally anything. They can go absolutely nuts. And in Halo, they've kind of um, backed themselves into a corner where they've kind of got to stick almost. It's almost got to be canon in a way. It's almost got to be exist within the Halo universe from like a lore and a single player perspective almost, which I think might ultimately come back to be the wrong idea, because especially now that they've got all these IPs, like why can't I run around as Doom Guy? In Halo, why is there not a armor core that's essentially Doom Guy, or an armor
Yeah,
core that's
exactly. Yeah,
someone from Gears?
yeah,
And the closest they come to that, you're right, is the Samurai Tenrai event, which admittedly you can get through the free event pass. But then, and again, they've had to address this, and this is kind of part of the problem with multiplayer. A lot of it they've had to address these things. They've had to
yeah,
go and change something or fix something. Is a lot of the stuff was behind a paywall, so you could
yeah,
unlock the main core, but then a lot of the things that made it look cool were locked behind a paywall. But
yeah,
then at the minute, there's essentially three things that they've released that were cool. And I don't think one of them was particularly cool. The cat ears, which
yep,
you see a lot, the samurai armor, which you see a lot, and the Iron Man skin, which you see a lot. And
yeah,
because there's been such a limited variety of good things, a lot of people are looking the same, which discourages me from getting them, because you kind of want to make your own spot and your own identity in the game. And if you look exactly the same as the other guy, then what's the point?
yeah. And I think even you look at just like outside of the fantastical stuff, and I think they justified the Tenrai stuff, didn't they, through something like it's kind of like an alternative Halo universe
Yeah,
sort of
and that's
thing.
how they're justifying these events where like the normal cosmetics kind of are almost within the canon of Halo, and then you've
Yeah,
kind of got these alternative timeline events, and the Cyber Showdown event had something similar where they had like a bloody spiky mohawk and
yeah.
and things like that. They're a little bit more out there, I guess.
And so, I don't understand why we can't just keep going with that idea, and they, can't introduce even wackier stuff. Like I had like had an image of like a steampunk suit, you know what I mean? Or like Overwatch used to do this pretty well, where it would have and it's harder to do because obviously the general structure of the Spartan is all the same, but they would have see different holiday events, and they kind of did this a little bit with Halo at Christmas, but it feels like in Overwatch, for example, they had on the Chinese New Year's was Year of the Dragon, and they
Yeah.
would come up with these elaborate Chinese mythological inspired skins. Obviously that's harder to do in Halo, right? Like nobody's denying that, but it feels like there could be more effort. And even if they're looking something realistic, why can't we get like skins of other Spartans, for example? It seems like a pretty easy thing to do. Why can't we have like a specific skin of some of the Spartans that were in, maybe not Lock, but some of the
I
Spartans
was just
that
about
were
to say
in.
you went all like locked, don't you? Like,
Yeah, no, I just want a lot, just to be hated in every game. Why can't we have skins of like other Spartans in Halo 5 or?
I guess they have kind of touched on that. So I guess the theme of season one is reach.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
when you have you completed the battle pass yet, Luke?
No, I haven't. I haven't.
You
I'm
haven't. So
40, 50 levels.
essentially, the entire battle pass. I mean, I've already hit level 100. It runs until May, which is maybe part of the problem as well. And you do unlock essentially the Halo Reach characters as part of the battle pass as well. So I think that's maybe something that we see going forward, is like they will start introducing things like blue team and maybe even red team from Halo
Yeah,
Wars.
Yeah.
For example, I think it would be cool as shit to have something like a Jerome skin, because I think Jerome's a really cool character from those games. But at the same time, and Pucks, I'm going to put this one back to you as well. They're kind of limited to, or they seem to be largely limiting themselves to the Halo universe and trying to keep things grounded in a sense. While, as you mentioned, Luke, with Overwatch, Apex, they basically go nuts. They have these really elaborate, cool designs on the skins, on the weapon skins, and things like that. So, Pucks, do you think, is that something that would maybe entice you a bit more if you were able to run around as a Doom Guy skin or a Gears of War skin, or even maybe something even more wild? I'm trying to think of an example, but would that sort of thing entice you to play a little bit more?
Personally, for me, no, really, but that's only because I appreciate why people like them, but I personally don't see the point in character skins for a first-person shooter game, because outside of the menus or the lobby or whatever,
Yeah,
you never see the character. And the same thing,
true.
again with like was it Warzone franchise or that kind of stuff, where they have new operators, whatever they call them, with all these. Yeah, they look cool in a menu, or when you can see the 3D model in the lobby screens, but in game, I never see it. So I personally think, what's the point? But then the other side of the coin, you've got something like Fortnite, where you do always see the character. It makes a lot more sense there because you can see it. Simple as
Yeah.
that. I do understand. I know Halo has got a third-person view mode. Is that right? That is correct, isn't it?
Say that again, sorry.
Halo, you can play the game in third person as well.
No, so you only kind of get the third person camera if you're in a vehicle. So if you're on like the back of a hog,
Right, okay.
or if you've got a turret. So if you pull a turret off its mount, you'll go into like a
Yeah,
third
sure.
person.
Yeah. So I suppose so. In those instances, which I think, especially if you're a higher competitive level of play, I guess from what I've seen on esports tournaments in the past on Halo and stuff, they don't tend to mess around with things like that. You typically stick with a battle rifle, whatever else, and you're playing the game, whatever, or with some tactical grenades here and there, maybe a few other weapons. But I don't. Yeah, I just don't see the point personally when you can't see the character. So as cool as it is as a concept, and I appreciate a lot of people would like that. That for me would not bring me into playing Halo full time or anything like that, just because I don't see the point.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and it's interesting you mentioned that, Pucks, because there's two things that they do in Halo, which is specifically to show off what you look like for that very reason, which is the opening scene where it pans out and it's kind of like it shows you the squad from the front, and then as the game starts, the camera zooms into your spot and then goes into the first person view, and at the end of the game, it's kind of like the winning pose, so you can show off. And I think Overwatch does something similar, where kind of at the end of the game, you can see everybody. Apex Legends has a thing in the lobby where you can see people and see what your character looks like. Same at the end of the game and things like that as well. But it is something interesting from an FPS game. Now, personally speaking, I don't really give two hoots about about cosmetics in these types of games. But I think from that perspective, that's what they're going for. That's ultimately what they're trying to do. They're trying to latch on to that crowd. They're trying to latch on to the people in Fortnite who are doing stupid dances and stupid emotes and are pretending to be Batman and things like that. But they're trying to do it in a very Halo way, which I think is ultimately going to prove to be the wrong decision. I think they're probably going to have to get all pretty wacky with it to really tap into that audience.
I think one thing which could entice me, and again, going back to what I was saying earlier with things like Call of Duty, where when you work with a specific gun, you're leveling up that gun as well as maybe yourself as in general kind of thing. And as you say, if a lot of people believe they need to go a bit more out there with it rather than keeping it as old school Halo, for lack of a better term, if I was using the standard assault rifle all the time and nothing else, I think it'd be quite cool where I'm not expecting attachments or things like that, but or just get wacky or cool looking skins as you level up that gun, for example. And if you get it up to, I don't know, level 50 or whatever the arbitrary number might be, then maybe you get a gold one to kind of show that you've used this gun a lot and you must be pretty good with it, or you spent an awful lot of time with it here's a gold skin, and you can rock that, because you can see that gun all the time, obviously, when you're playing shooting games. So I think that would be a cool thing to add for someone like myself, say. But yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
I think that would probably be a good idea, because that progression is what's lacking at the moment. Especially, like, say, for someone like myself who's hit level 100 on the battle pass, there is literally nothing for me to work towards at the moment. Now, for me personally, that's okay. I don't mind. Playing the game is enough for me at the moment, because, as Luke mentioned earlier, they've nailed it. So that's good enough for me. But for a lot of people, it isn't, because of the way gamers are tuned, I guess trained these days, and because of how games are, particularly these live service games. Look, is there anything sort of weird and wonderful and wacky that you would like to see them do with that sort of thing, or do you prefer them trying to stick within sort of the Halo universe?
No, I'd like them to do some wacky stuff. I don't think especially Halo multiplayer, like it doesn't have to be serious. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's quite funny. There's quite a lot of funny things that happen in Halo multiplayer because of the physics engine and the way that the game performs. And I think there's room for them to incorporate designs that are based around the design language that they currently have. But I think there's also a lot of room for them to just do weird stuff, and make it worth me, spending some money, because right now I don't think it is worth it. Why would I, if in particular if I played like other service games, if I did play Apex or you can't buy skins in Overwatch, but you can only do loot boxes. But if I was playing those games, like, there's such an abundance of cool things that you can go and buy, all cosmetic, of course, but that look really cool, and there's enough of it that you can kind of feel somewhat unique, if you see what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
It's not as if everybody's wearing caddies all the time, or everybody's in the samurai, the Tenrai armor. So I think they just need to just do much more of it on a more varied scale. If they can do that, then I think they'll have fixed that problem pretty easily. But I don't know how much of this stuff they've got in reserve, or that they're planning to dole out, or how they're planning to dole it out. So yeah, I think that's an issue. But to me, it's an easily fixable one, right? You just need to make cosmetic stuff that's different, and I think they've got enough talented artists that they can do that quite easily, but they need to actually do it.
Yeah, and I think maybe tapping into the crossover type events, like I said, they've got to release a Doom Guy sort of themed Spartan Core at some point, or a Gears of War themed one. Maybe this might be up your street, Luke. Would you be into sort of like a Batman themed Spartan Core if they could? Could do that, the possibilities from that perspective are endless if they just let themselves be a little bit more crazy with it. I think.
Yeah, I mean, you could do. God, I mean, they could do RoboCop. You know what I mean? Like, do a tie-in. Like, there's so much stuff you can actually do. And you see Fortnite do this, where it touches on the zeitgeist of everything, right? Like, there's crossover skins for everything in that game. And I'm not, like, obviously it's not, Halo is more limited by the type of characters that are in the game and the world, and I get that, but you can't go as wacky as Fortnite. But look at Apex. Apex has very the design language is not super distant from Halo. It is different, obviously very different, but it's not Fortnite levels of distance. And look at the kind of skins that they can do in that game, and that's what they should be aiming for in Infinite.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, man. I'd like to see where they go. Obviously, I know it's a really, I think if you were to suggest them going too wacky, I think part of the problem is there's a loud minority who would be against that. I think if they went in that direction, but I think it could be pretty cool, and it'll be something that would entice me to spend money in the game, which, other than the battle pass at the moment, I'm unlikely to do unless they seriously improve it. So I think maybe just around one more around this topic, and then maybe we'll just spend a few minutes on the TV show. I've got one final question. I'll maybe pose this to you first, Pox, and then maybe Luke will come to you, which is, Was going free to play the right decision for Halo?
Man, that's actually a tough question.
Yeah, I mean, so they announced 20 million or more than 20 million players so far, which is the biggest launch they've had for Halo. Obviously, it's on PC at launch, on Xbox One, Xbox Series, campaigns in Game Pass. But I would imagine a large chunk of that has come from the free-to-play portion of the game. Obviously, it was massive on Steam at launch. That's, I guess dwindled a little bit since. But do you think it was or will at least prove to be in the future the right decision?
Yeah, I think that last part's the important bit there, because I think given the current state of the game right now, after 2 months, I'd probably say no. I think if anything, you'd probably want to, if you kept it as non-free to play, as a paid content, then you know that a lot of the feedback you are getting is going to be from the large pool of people, or assuming it's a large pool of people who play via Game Pass or purchase the game. All the feedback you're going to get is from that player base which have invested in the game. So if anything, you've got, as a developer, as a business, I feel like you'd have more reason to take that feedback on board. Whereas when you go free to play of a game like this, the IP is of large scale in terms of it's what it's known for and its popularity. But I think with anything that's free to play like this, if you're going to get so much feedback to the point where I imagine it'll be very, very difficult to determine which is genuine and good feedback and what is just blatant kind of nonsense or just kind of baseless criticism, I think is another way to put it. But I think in time, once they, as you say, quote unquote, fix the game, for lack of a better term, given again from the general comments I hear from you guys on the internet, then maybe in time, sure, say, we're going to go free to play now because we have this dedicated paid fan base, which absolutely love the title, the hardcore fans, so to speak. We've got all these other people we'd love to introduce the Halo multiplayer. Let's go free to play. Hey, all you guys which have invested in this game from the beginning, have a load of in-game currency or whatever else. Thanks a lot for playing. And, and bring on these other, hopefully this newer pool of people. But I think when you go free to play from the off, and as you say, you're doing it from the outset, you're therefore immediately having to compete, against, as you say, your Apex Legends, your Warzone, your Fortnites, which have not only been doing it for a longer time, but they are established and, for the most part, all of them successful in their own right.
And that's because multi-platform is probably
and multi-platform, of course. Yeah, I appreciate. Halo being a specific IP to PC and Xbox is arguably limiting, but again, I'd argue again that's counter to that is that it can't be helped because it's just the nature of the beast, I guess, in terms of where the IP is and the direction they want to go. And obviously Microsoft wants to protect that and wants that to be at least a console seller for the most part, even though we all know they're kind of arguably not moving away from that business. But to round up, for the short term, no, I think maybe it could have stayed as paid for content, but in time, once you've locked down and established it, especially if they maybe knew from the outset that it wasn't complete or content complete in terms of what they would have liked and wanted that dedicated fan base feedback, then I think in time have it free to play, but for the time being, I think maybe not.
Yeah. Do you have any particular thoughts on that, Luke?
It's interesting, isn't it? I think I think it was probably the right decision to go free to play. I mean, you look at the numbers the game is doing, and I don't mean the concurrent daily users at the moment necessarily. Even though it's still getting decent enough numbers, I'm sure not as much as they would like, but if you look at the amount of players that it's reaching across different platforms, I think that's really good, and it will only continue to do that. The problem for free for free will be trying to keep that consistent and trying to keep the get an uptake on it. And the problem with free to play games is that they're entirely dependent on two things. One, progression in terms of your cosmetics, battle pass, all that sort of stuff, and two is content. And really, out of those two, I'd say probably content is key. because content progression only lasts up to a certain point, and then you've got nothing else but the game, and that's when you need to kind of supersede it with content, and you keep that. There's kind of this inward cycle that happens where you're progressing. You know, you might get close to a cap, and then new content comes out, then there's a new battle pass, and you're progressing, and then it just repeats itself. And I don't, you know, I mean, look at, you know, how have we? I know it's only February, but we've not even got one extra map yet, which, you know, the game's been out since December. I would have expected them to have some content like that ready to go on the stocks in the background, you know, just kind of waiting for the right time. With the roadmap is delayed. We don't know, you know, Joseph Staten, it was just like, I'm not going to give any more updates on it really, because it's just, we need to work that out. And you can have a great free, and I think it's a great game. You know, the multiplayer is fantastic, but it will die unless they get content into it quickly. Like, it just will. It will have a very loyal fan base, of which, you know, you and I no doubt will make a part of that. We'll keep playing it because we love it. But if they really want it to be successful, and look, I don't think it's going to be, you know, it's clearly not going to be as successful as something like Fortnite or even Destiny or stuff like that. But realistically, I think Halo's a game that's capable of getting to, you know, kind of Apex Legends numbers. Do you know what I mean? Like a good core amount of people playing that game every day and being a runaway success. But the only way they're going to get there in the free to play model is to keep engaging content coming, which is a problem at the minute. And I think that's made worse by the fact that they've had so long to develop the game, and they, you know, have got a great selection of core maps and modes and all that stuff, but core features, even on the multiplayer side, I mean, playlists, right? How the hell weren't there, you know, playlists in there day one? Something as simple as that would have kept more people in, rather than, you know, people just dropping out because they don't want to play oddball for the 5th time in a row, or, you know, on a playlist like that. It's just silly. It's just so stupid. So I think in the long term it will prove to be the right decision, but they're in that period where they're clearly trying to learn, okay, what do we need to do? How do we need to reinvigorate this? I think they'll get there. They're talented enough. They've got enough money behind them, and they've got enough people behind it, but they need to make that happen within the next few months. Otherwise, I think it will be a little too late to kind of galvanize the player base on the game as much as they might want.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And they've got a lot riding on this. Obviously, they've invested heavily in Halo as a franchise, and obviously in Halo Infinite. This, you know, whether it turns out to be or not, this has been described as a 10-year game. And here we are talking 2-3 months from launch saying, right, they need to get content coming out and quickly if they want to keep this game alive, which kind of shows the delicate balance that these games have got to try and get, you know, between content and features, and whether it be maps, modes, skins, battle passes. There's a lot of things that they've got to balance, and they've ultimately got to get right in order to sort of retain players, because that's ultimately what's going to determine whether it's successful in the long term as well. They can keep a large enough player base, like games like Warzone, Fortnite, and Apex Legends continue to do. So
yeah.
Lovely. Well, I guess we'll round things out with just a quick discussion on the Halo TV show, which we had our first full trailer for during the AFC Championship game just a couple of weeks ago, which I think has been met with a lot of actually positive reactions from the community. Pucks, did you see the trailer out of interest?
No, I'm afraid I haven't. I saw like a few snippets here and there, but I haven't seen the full thing. No.
Is a Halo TV show anything that tickles your fancy?
I would definitely watch it, but by my understanding, it's limited. Is it Paramount Plus or something, or have I got that wrong?
Yes, it is. So that'll be available. Should be available in the UK by the time it comes out via. I think it's going to be included as part of Sky Cinema. So if you've already got Sky Cinema, you'll get Paramount Plus. But I do think you'll be able to like just subscribe to it directly as well. But it's not available in the UK just yet.
I don't have any Sky packages, no. But for me, I mean, again, as cool as it probably is, sorry, I will not be spending money on a subscription service just to watch that. But I appreciate obviously the hardcore fan base will, but if I can't get it any other way apart from those, I mean, if it was on like Netflix or something, then sure, I'd jump straight in because why not? But it's not enough to make me subscribe to another service on top of a number of others, which I think we all subscribe to for the most part.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and that's maybe part of the challenge that they're going to have, which is particularly outside of the States. I think in the States, Paramount Plus has been around a little while, and I think it's home of things like Star Trek and things like that. So there will be sort of a large sci-fi base that are already subscribed. But in the UK and a lot of Europe, I think it's going to be maybe difficult for them. Now, personally, I'm really excited for it, and what they've shown so far has me even more excited, which surprises me a little bit. But Luke, what are your thoughts and feelings on the TV show based on what they've shown so far? Is there something you're excited to see? Do you like the general direction that they've gone? Do you think the production value in the trailers that they've shown looks good enough for this type of show? What are your thoughts?
I am excited and fearful at the same time. It's kind of like starting a day on a new job, where you've got that kind of excitement but unease because it's not too familiar. And I've watched the trailer a couple of times, and it's really, to me, it's super hard to gauge if this will be any good. Like, I feel it will either be surprisingly good or a disaster, and I can't like nothing in the middle of that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't think it will just be decent. It's been coming for so long in so many kind of iterations in the background that it's almost surprising we got to this point where there's like a functional TV show happening, which I think is cool, and I think probably is a testament to the desire of people who really love the franchise to get this in front of an audience, a different audience. And I thought the trailer, actually, I think the CG looked pretty good, and kind of the wider kind of panoramic shots they had of different, the Halo, and it seemed like there was a Covenant world, and
High Charity looked
High Charity, yeah, it looked very good. So I think they've done that well. I was really impressed as well with the elites. I thought they looked excellent, which again was surprising because you don't necessarily know how they translate. They translate to live action and in a CG context with an actor in a suit, basically. But I think we've got to the point where you can actually make those kind of wacky designs, because they are quite strange designs, but amazing ones, and they work. So I think all that looks good, and I like that they're deliberately divorcing this from the timeline that we know of. It's its own thing. I think that had to happen. And I think the template, funnily enough, that I hope that they kind of go down is a bit like, and because I didn't think this, having Master Chief as a character could work very well on the TV show, but having watched The Mandalorian and love The Mandalorian, like it's the Mandalorian is a bit like Master Chief. You know what I mean? Like,
there are definitely similarities between them, isn't there?
Yeah, obviously different characters, but the concept of a guy in a suit and being a badass and not saying a great deal, is very similar, and it works, and it's very well done. And I hope that's what they have here. I just don't know if it'll land. I just really don't know. Cortana looks terrible, but obviously we'd say that because we're used to the games. I think it's still Jen Taylor doing the voice, isn't it? So that's awesome. Yeah. And I think that was absolutely the right choice. I think if they would have gone with the new design and taken Jen Taylor away from it, it would have been way too strange to me, way too foreign. So at least there's that familiarity. And I think actually it's got a pretty good cast. So yeah, I don't know what I'm expecting. I don't know. How do you feel about it? Because I really can't pass whether like I am looking forward to it, and I'm gonna get whatever I can to watch it. I will watch it, but I think you know what it is. I think I don't want them to mess it up so badly that people kind of look at Halo as a bit of a joke. I
Yeah.
think that's my fear. Like having the love for the franchise that I do, I just want them to have it hit and hit well. But I'm just worried that it might not.
Yeah, so I've kind of got very similar thoughts, which are I'm kind of cautiously optimistic, and I really liked what they've shown so far, but I do remain nervous about what direction they go. And I think I do like the fact that it's this silver timeline, and they're kind of going in that direction where it's not going to impact core canon. Um, but that does make me nervous. And there were parts of that trailer where it's obvious they've deviated quite far from it already, um, in a lot of respects, based on things that they said, even just why the Spartans exist. In the law, Spartans existed to fight insurrectionists before the Covenant even existed, and then they essentially were the weapon against the Covenant. But in the TV show, they're kind of making out like they were created for to
Yeah.
fight the Covenant, and something like that is, I guess, relatively minor because it's more backstory, but it is quite a deviation from the core. Now I can live with that. I think it might be challenging, because I'm so sort of used to and have read and watched so much about the existing, but it does make me wonder sort of how far they'll take that. And I think one of the biggest things from the trailer that I found was the human raised by the Covenant, which it doesn't exist in any core canon to my knowledge. And based on kind of Covenants, the Covenants, how much they despise humanity doesn't make an awful lot of sense. So I'm really curious as to how they're going to explain that. But I agree, the elites look really good. I thought the best part of the trailer was the scene where Chief is fighting the two elites. I thought that looked really,
that's
really
cool.
good. I love the way that the Chief moved. It kind of, he was moving not like he does in the games, because obviously you confined to the games, but how it's described in the books, if that makes sense. Like he looks
Yeah.
like a super soldier, not, because I think that's really difficult for them to get in the game because it's a first person shooter. And the way it's described in the books, I think they've kind of nailed that look based on the small snippets that we've seen, obviously.
I also really liked the sense of scale of Chief next to the elites in that scene, where you don't really get that in the same way of the games, that the elites are much bigger. Like they're huge, even compared to Chief. So the super soldier thing kind of works in a really good way with the way that they made him move in that scene, because he's very nimble and like he's kind of weaving in and out of them. He's not brute forcing it. He's almost too fast for them.
Yeah.
So I thought that was super cool. They show there's a glimpse of brutes as well, isn't there, in that trailer?
Oh,
Am
I
I
don't think there was. I don't think there was in the trailer.
Yeah, maybe it's something else. I'll have to go back and
So
rewatch it.
there is a prophet in there.
Yeah, I
There's a
remember
there
that.
is a jackal in one of the later scenes in the trailer, which I thought the
It
jackal
may
looked
be.
pretty good.
Yeah, it may be the face of the jackal I'm thinking of,
Yeah.
actually.
And
Yeah,
that's actually one of the things that I was most impressed by, which is, you touched on it, Luke, is generally just the CG seemed to be, it seemed like they've invested a lot of money in that. I was really worried that it was going to look really cheap and that
yeah,
was going to put me off, but I think they've done quite a good job then. And speaking of Cortana, it's interesting because Jen Taylor wasn't originally cast as Cortana in the TV show, because Cortana is Halsey.
yeah.
So the actress whose name I forget, who plays Dr. Halsey, was originally meant to do the VO for Cortana, but I think due to COVID or scheduling conflicts, they weren't able to do that. So they got Jen Taylor back in to do Cortana as well, which I do think was a really nice touch.
Yeah.
I think I agree with that. I think it was good, but I think because they've gone for Jen Taylor's voice for Cortana, I think they really should have gone for a more um Halo like Cortana look, because I think the jarring thing is hearing Cortana's voice and seeing it come from
and seeing
different
that
Cortana.
abomination.
I think if they had done it, and actually, I think it might be Jen Taylor doing the mocap for. I think I read that it's not just her doing the voice; it's actually her playing the character as well. Where I think if maybe the actress who played Dr. Halsey also did the voice of Cortana, it would be a little less jarring, because I'm not seeing one thing and expecting hearing one thing and expecting to see something different. If that makes sense. But I agree. I would like to see her just look more AI like. Give her a shade of blue. I appreciate that. That's fairly simplistic, but if you look at some of the AI in the blur cutscenes from like Halo Wars 2, if you look at someone like Isabel or something like that, I think Isabel is someone who looks human but also looks like an AI. And I think they've tried to make her look too much like a human in this. So we'll see. It might just be something that needs a lot of getting used to, but it is coming out March 24th, so we're not too far away, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I guess just to wrap the show up, I'm going to ask one question for you both. I'll put it up on screen here from John Mitchell, which I think is interesting. So, do you think we'll see Master Chief without his helmet? And what do you think the fans' reaction will be? And this is kind of going back to maybe the Mandalorian comparisons, because obviously in the Mandalorian we don't see him with his helmet off an awful lot, and it was quite a big reveal when he did. And we haven't seen the Chief without his helmet on in any of the games, except for a very brief tease at the end of Halo 4, I think it was, and in some of the earlier media, like the anime that they made and things like that when he's a kid. So do you think we'll see Chief without his helmet on, Luke?
I mean, they've already, I guess, shown more flesh of Chief than I think I'd anticipated. I think we get that. I think it's supposed to be Chief, where it's the pan over the guy's back in the trailer. I assume that's supposed to be Chief. So, I think the thing is, again, they need to, and I hope, they would look at something like The Mandalorian if they're going to do that, in that, yes, we can see his face. I don't think there's a problem. It's not the Halo games. So, we're past that element. But they need to have it be meaningful. He can't be taking off his helmet every 2 minutes, and we need he needs to be in the suit pretty much all the time, apart from maybe 1 or 2 moments where we can see, what he looks like. But I'd be really interested to see how they how does he look? How do they play that, right?
I mean, we've got an idea from the lore, which we know. I mean, I think he's described as just a white guy with a skinhead, but which I guess is fairly typical of military characters in a lot of cases. Obviously he's played by, is it Pablo Schreiber? I don't actually know what he looks like, if I'm being completely honest. I don't recall him being in.
He looks like Master Chief as a Marine, like a
all right, okay, Marine. So it might
I think it would work.
The only see, I'm kind of in the camp where I kind of think they shouldn't do it. I think maybe the only time they should do, which I don't know if they could really do this, is if he gets beat the fuck up and his helmet gets smashed. I think maybe if they do something like that, that could maybe be good. I'm trying to think if they've ever done that in the games. I just, we kind of got a little close to it in 5, where the Locke cracks his visor, but otherwise, we don't see Locke's come up with this podcast like 3 or 4 times now.
He's come up too much for my liking, to be honest.
But in some of the books, so for example, Shadows of Reach, Chief's suit gets shredded to pieces from a plasma shot from like a phantom or something. So it, in the books, they do explore kind of like the, I guess not kind of Chief with his helmet off, but how the armor it's not impenetrable. This is
Yeah.
very hot plasma that's being fired at them. If they get hit, it's going to take off. So I wonder if they could maybe do it in that sort of way, where maybe you get a glimpse but not the whole thing. But I agree, I don't want him having scenes where he's just in a suit but with his helmet off, just having conversations with people. I think that would be really really off-putting. So
yeah, totally.
Pucks, do you want to see Chief with his helmet off?
I think for the most part, because in all the, as you say, for most of the games, you don't ever. He's always been. That's always the mystery of it, of the character, the fact you don't really know what he looks like. And I feel like, in a way, even though I think, as one of you said earlier, that the show is pretty much divorced from the canon of the games or whatever else, I don't know. I still feel like the good thing about the Chief is that you don't know what he looks like, and that sense of mystery to him, I think, is what makes him more interesting. I think if you were to make him take his helmet off just so you could see the actor underneath or whatever else, I don't know. I don't really see the point. But I mean, from a storytelling perspective, obviously knowing some of the games, I don't think that would be the best move. But I mean, I'm no storyteller, I'm afraid. So
yeah, but I guess I think sort of almost the faceless protagonist in video games, particularly back then, was something. In Halo, in Halo C, Chief barely said anything. I think it works in games, but even in the games, they've kind of sort of given Chief more personality. Would that translate well to TV?
Well, I don't necessarily feel like he has to be the silent protagonist, as you say in the later games. Again, like Infinite, for example. Obviously, there's, from what I've seen at least, there's an awful lot of dialogue in comparison, as you say, to the first game. So I don't think necessarily he has to be silent. I think he could very much be vocal. I just don't necessarily think he has to take his helmet off and you see his head to make him engaging. As I say, I think the character is the strong man with the helmet. It's not necessarily who he is underneath, if that makes sense. Like the character is the armor, isn't it? I think because arguably it could be anyone underneath with their voice, of course, but.
Well, actually, I don't think that's I actually disagree with that in terms of Halo, in terms of the context of Halo, because I think kind of a lot of it is around sort of Chief, who he is, and how they describe him as not being particularly the best at anything, but how he's almost like a jack of all trades, master of none, in a Spartan sense. How he's sort of defined by, he's often defined in the books by like almost being lucky and being a leader. So there is a lot to the character. It'll be interesting. I don't know how I'll feel if they do it. To be perfectly honest, we'll see. I've just put a comment up there from Flap where he says that can maybe be the cliffhanger ending at the end, which maybe is kind of what they did with Halo 4. Essentially, that was how they ended Halo 4. Am I right? Am I remembering that right, Luke?
I think that's right. Yeah. Personally, I want them to do exactly what Flap says, except it slowly pans up and it's the guy who plays Locke. He's actually
Locke's being shit the whole time,
and then he gives a wink to the camera, fade to black.
Yeah,
that's what I want.
Yeah, I don't think we'll be seeing any Locke in this TV show, but that would be. That would be pretty funny, actually, if it was Locke the whole time, the actor that played Locke. So, well, I'm actually I am genuinely looking forward to it. I'm definitely going to give it a chance. I'm going to try and go into it with an open mind, and hopefully they deliver something at least good. I'm not necessarily expecting Mandalorian levels of TV show, which I really, really enjoyed the Mandalorian, but hopefully they can get somewhere near that if possible. And hopefully they get an opportunity to maybe do a second or maybe third season, and sort of we can start seeing where they go with the story in this alternative timeline. So, but I appreciate we've been going a lot longer than we originally expected. So before the show, we were thinking, oh, maybe we'll talk about the direct or something like that to fill time. We don't have enough, but we've covered a lot, and particularly on the story side of things, we probably could have gone even deeper. So I think we'll end the show there. Just want to thank everybody in chat who's joined. We've had a few people jump in since I first mentioned it. So we obviously Flap still knocking around. We've had John Mitchell, Parksy, Armello, Fellows jumped in. Judzilla was around. Tukungulu's been here. Installation 00 again. It was awesome to see him jump in. Again, if you are not subscribed to him, you're interested in law, please do. Wandering Dutch, Mexico. Thank you everyone for joining. A little bit of a different show. A little bit of a Halo special. We might revisit it later when there's maybe more campaign DLC or after the TV shows come out. It'll maybe be good to chat about that together. But guys, thank you very much for joining. Luke, any sort of closing thoughts, mate?
Closing thoughts.
Yeah. Any final words?
Just don't bring Locke back. I think in anything, just make sure he's not around. And other than that, I need some better cosmetics in Infinite.
Yeah,
that's it really. Oh, and also the TV show. Don't mess it up.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
it.
Pox, thanks as always, mate. I know this was maybe a little bit of a different show for you. I appreciate me, Luke, have done a lot of the talking, but hopefully you enjoyed it, mate.
I very much anticipated that from the off anyway. I think you've done a fantastic job hosting, Scott. I know, as you said in the green room before we went live, it's always quite nervous and have those weird feelings of, oh man, am I going to mess this up? But you know, when you're passionate about a subject as much as you both are, it all kind of naturally flows. And I've actually really enjoyed listening to it this evening. If I'm honest, it's been really good fun.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, mate. And obviously, we hope chat enjoyed the show as well. I guess a few things. What does Flap normally do to close us out? So you can get us on Discord if you want to join that. Links should be in the description. Obviously, you can catch us on Twitter. That should all be in the description as well. Please do like, share, and subscribe if you like the content. It would be really appreciated. But other than that, thank you all very much, and we will see you on the next show.